Faith, it's really good to be with you in your home. Thank you for agreeing for me to be nosy and ask you a few questions, if I may.
Of course you can.
Bless you. Faith, I'd like to know a little bit about your background. We know about you as an author, and I want to talk about the books, but tell us a bit about your childhood. You've written about it and in your book Troubled Journey, which of course is a big clue, but tell us a little about your childhood.
Well, I was born to missionary parents in the far northwest of China, where temperatures sank to minus 40 in the winter and equally high in the summer. It was I left home at the age of 6 to be sent to boarding school right in the far west of China. But the Japanese were very much on the offensive, and after 3 months at school they were right at the gates of the school, and we would all have been put into concentration camps like the other half of the school. So we were just woken up, told to put on twice as many clothes as we possessed, and grab 2 toys and come. And we were all piled into lorries, ready to set off for we knew not where. But before they did so, they read us all Psalm 91, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." And with that confidence, nothing will harm you, they said. Nothing. And I went out with all the other youngsters aged between 6 and 11, thinking, this is great, nothing will harm us. So that was piled into these lorries, and off we went. We didn't have any idea where.
And presumably your parents were unaware as to what was happening.
Absolutely. In fact, any correspondence with our parents was very difficult. Months went past without any they didn't know where we were, and I hardly knew my home.
So, Faith, was that tough, a little girl in a boarding school and then being taken away? All right, a great adventure, but nevertheless, you must have longed for your parents.
Very tough, yes. I mean, I used to cry in bed at night for them and long for my dad's reassuring kiss, but it didn't happen. And they were very strict with us, perhaps over strict, I would think. So punishments were very, very frequent and very harsh.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
I had an older brother at the school, but my younger brother was still with my parents because he was only 3.
Well, looking back, Faith, do you feel your parents, who obviously were zealous Christians, weren't they? They were missionaries with what we now call the Overseas Missionary Fellowship, China Inland Mission as it was. Do you feel perhaps they weren't wise in continuing the on the frontline missionary work when your brother was in this situation?
Yes, I do, but it was the common practice of parents everywhere, in England anyway, to send their children to boarding school. Both my parents went to boarding school, and anyone who could afford it was sent their children. So that was their mindset, that the children would not be educated at home. But so they never thought twice about it. But certainly we missed our parents.
And you miss them especially because tragedy was to come into your household, wasn't it?
Yes. That was not until we came home a year or 2 later, when my youngest brother was killed on the road. He'd just learnt to master his bicycle and was cycling to some swimming baths with my mother, and he stopped at a roadside and he said, "This is where we ring our bells, Mummy," because he was about to cross into a main road, and then inexplicably he suddenly set off and he went straight into a double-decker bus. He didn't stand an earthly chance. It was very, very grievous for my parents.
Absolutely.
Yes.
How old was he?
He was 6.
And where were you at the time?
After our time in India, where the school was evacuated to, as soon as the war was over, 1945, we we returned to China, and the mission sent all the missionaries back to England because the communists were taking over, and that was the end of their period in China at that time. So we collected little Philip, and we were all returned by steamship. A long voyage, 6 weeks at least.
Wow.
To England.
And where were you when you heard about the tragedy?
I was at school in a very prestigious Christian education school, Clarendon School, which was in Abergele at the time, and the headmistress sent for me, and she was Miss Swain, and we were very nervous of her. She carried with her a large white hearing aid because she was totally deaf.
Oh, really?
And yes, and she used to control the girls with one upraised finger, and they all flattened against doors and let her pass. So I was very nervous when I was told that Miss Swain wanted me, and I was not a good child. I climbed on school roofs and did all sorts of misdemeanours and not commendable. So when I heard that Miss Swain wanted to see me in her private room, I was very, very apprehensive. And she said, "Sit down, my dear." And then she told me with tears streaming down her face that my brother had been killed. So she was
streaming down her face.
Yes, I was just too shocked to cry at that stage.
I think she asked you, didn't she? Are you trusting in the Lord?
She did. You're right, absolutely. And I said, I think so, because I was only 13 at the time, just 12, 13. And she said, "Well, you'll have to trust him today, my dear, more than you ever trusted him before." And that was, and it made me think. I can't point to a conversion date, but certainly it threw me on the Lord in a very much more real way.
And you must have understood the gospel.
Oh,
that,
yes,
you were a sinner who needed forgiveness,
yes.
and the Lord Jesus had come to die for you.
Yes, I did realise that.
I think probably you felt let down again by your parents at this time, didn't you?
I did.
What?
Well, they chose to go straight back to the mission field, this time to Malaysia, because China was closed to the missionaries. And I felt it was too soon. Just 6 months after Philip's death, we needed them, and particularly my older brother, who was a bit of a rascal, and yes, he needed his dad, but they went back, and I have a sort of feeling that the situation was too much for them. They needed to get back. I don't think they could cope with my brother, and I don't suppose I was particularly easy either.
All right. And you left school at what age?
18.
And what did you go on to?
On to a teacher training college.
All right.
Yes.
So did you become a school teacher?
I did.
For how long?
Only 2 years.
And what did you teach?
Juniors, so it was everything.
Everything.
Nature, history, geography, the lot.
And did you enjoy it?
Oh yes. I did enjoy it. Yes. But I don't think I was a born and bred teacher.
Right.
I hadn't got that temperament.
But you hadn't studied history particularly?
No.
No, amazing. No. So your early life is in this book, Troubled Journey, A Missionary Childhood in War-Torn China. And this is one of 2 autobiographical books you've written. We'll come on to the other one a little bit later, if I may. But it's a very moving read, isn't it? Did you find it hard to write?
I did. Though, in a way, it was a catalyst for my sorrows, to put it on in paper like that, and it made me think it through and understand why they'd acted as they did, and the whole thing was an exercise which has helped me.
Therapeutic.
Yes, that's the word.
Yes. All right, and then you got married.
Yes.
To Paul. Yes, go on. Sorry.
Well, he proposed after I'd been teaching for 2 to 3 years.
Were you in? He was a minister. Were you in his church? Or?
No. He was still at Spurgeon College.
All right. Okay.
And he proposed to me on the first night we'd ever been together.
All right. Did you think that was a little hasty?
As I said no.
Oh, that's okay.
But he tried again a week later. Yes, and I said, well, yes, but I didn't know him. I didn't know him at all. So I was a little bit naive, but I just thought this is God's will for me, and so I say yes. So there was no question of falling in love at that stage, but I grew to love him.
Was it sort of too submissive of you, do you think?
Yes. I mean, I'd had no home background, and my parents were abroad again, so I had nobody to relate to or ask their opinion or anything like that. So yes, but in God's purposes, it was right.
Right, and he then became a minister where to begin with?
Northallerton.
Right, in Yorkshire.
In Yorkshire,
yes.
No less. Yes.
And a number of years there. How long were you there?
The first 18 months he was on his own. I was still teaching. I couldn't break off. And then we were married, and he was 2 or 3 years there before the church was actually a sad day. The church secretary came round and said, "I'm very sorry to tell you, but we can't support you anymore." We only had 12 members, and I'd had my first 2 children, and they didn't feel able to meet the stipend any longer.
Wow. Now, at this time, was there any thought of you ever writing? Was this crossing your mind at all? Did it?
No.
Not at all?
None at all. I had always loved writing from a school child and writing my essays, but I had not put pen to paper, and any thought of writing was simply non-existent.
But you love the Lord, you were reading the Bible. Were you a voracious reader of other books?
I did read a lot, though Paul introduced me to a lot of other good books,
right,
and theological books and all sorts. I've never seen so many books as he possessed. Yes.
All right. And which genre of book did you enjoy most?
I've always loved biography.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I read The Reformation in England by Bunyan. That's him, and the 2 volumes.
Yes.
It just opened my eyes to the wonder of church history.
Yes.
And I think that's where my love of history sprang from.
Yes. They're 2 great books. I always love them, though, especially when they become biographical about one individual.
Yes.
And then it gives you a bit of the political background,
Anne
etc.
Boleyn.
Yes.
I still like Anne Boleyn.
Do you? Yes.
And I still think she was a Christian.
Yes, I think she probably was, yes. Oh, wonderful. All right, so you went from Northallerton to Shepshed. Which is where?
In Leicestershire.
All right.
Yes, just not far from Loughborough.
But you must have had Yorkshire in your heart. Did you ever come back?
Well, does Hull count?
It does,
yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
So you came back to Kingston upon Hull.
Yes. But the longest ministry was Shepshed. He was 17 years there, and then he was taken ill.
Right.
Nervous illness, and had about 3 years not preaching, and then the Hull church called him, and it seemed right, although I didn't want to go to Yorkshire.
Oh, didn't you? Oh dear.
No.
I can't understand why anybody would feel like that, but there we are. But you
well,
went...
it was the first home I'd ever had, really.
Oh, right, in Shepshed,
and
yes.
I brought up my children there, and everything was familiar. I loved it. It was perhaps one of the biggest crises of my whole life, leaving Shepshed.
Was it really?
Yes, because it was my security and everything. Yes, I told you once in another interview how I prayed, I go anywhere, Lord, but not north.
Not to
Not
Yorkshire.
to the north. Yes.
All right.
But
Was it a tough time?
no, it was a very good time, and I think Paul's ministry flourished.
Yeah.
The church grew to about 90 members, which is from a very small group.
Well, Hull, I think, has the lowest church attendance per head of population of anywhere in the UK. Yes,
right.
yeah. And you were a pastor's wife, so were there great expectations of you doing pastoral duties as well?
Oh, I was asked in politeness whether I would like to take over the making of the tea, and I said, "Oh no,"
Right, because
I wasn't good at it.
Right,
I mean,
okay.
they were used to. That was their contribution.
Right.
Yes.
So when did you first think about writing?
Not until Paul's ministry had finished.
Really?
Yes, really. I would say 78, 79.
Right, and he was retiring,
yes,
was he?
He retired, yes.
Yes. And why? What were the steps that led you to writing?
Now that's an interesting question, because I think I must have been to Bradgate Park and seen Lady Jane's life and where she lived, and that inspired me. But
this is the
that's later on. Yes, I come back to it. But
yes, all right.
but the first book, The Grace in Winter, was simply that I was writing these poems, and I loved Rutherford.
Yes, why? Because you've written quite a little about Samuel Rutherford and his friends. And
yes.
So tell us about this.
My mother had a copy of the complete letters, and I was devouring them. I thought they were absolutely wonderful, and I thought I could try. Somebody had written an introduction. So these letters are all but verse, in everything but actual lines. And it said a skilled versifier, not a poet but a versifier, could turn these into poetry. And I thought, well, I can only try.
Oh, really? It was a very bold thing to do.
Yes.
And so Samuel Rutherford, living in the 1600s, imprisoned in North Scotland, wasn't he, in Aberdeen, and he wrote letters to various individuals.
I showed the
pastoral letters.
The first 6 poems to Paul, and I was amazed that he liked them. And he sent them off to the Reverend Ian Murray in Australia.
So he was connected with the Banner of Truth Trust. Yes.
Who wrote back and said, yes, please, we want a lot more, and also we want the biographies and reasons that lay behind the letters.
Right.
And so why was he writing, Samuel Rutherford, writing to these women or whatever, whoever it was? What was the cause of writing them? So I wrote little biographies of the correspondence, and then the poems, taking Rutherford's words. They weren't my words at all. They were Rutherford's words, Rutherford's thoughts, but I put them into verse.
And where had this gift been all these years? Was it just laying dormant, ready to be awakened?
Paul once said to my son, never ask your mother about English, she can't write. So that was the wisdom, she can't write. So I assumed that to be correct. But then I think with practice I was able to do more.
Right.
Yes.
So I think it was Andrew Bonner, wasn't it, who said about versifying Samuel Rutherford.
Yes, he did.
So what he wrote 200 years ago
I
stimulated something in your own mind.
Yes.
And poetry doesn't normally sell, does it?
No.
But this was a successful book as far as you know.
It's gone about 9,000, which is not too bad.
That's very good.
In terms of yes, it's not better than most of the others.
Really?
Yes.
Amazing. All right, so you wrote this, and then what happened after that?
Well, people wrote and said, could she write about the people he wrote to, minus the poems?
Right.
And I thought, yes, I could. So I spent time working through people's lives.
Yes.
And and that's made the next book.
So this is Samuel Rutherford and his friends.
Yes, that's it.
Which is a very unique book. But it was the beginning, really, wasn't it, of your
yes, that
real...
was much more serious, yes.
Yes, and short biographies of... Well, these people would be largely forgotten if you hadn't written about them. Yes.
Well, they would never... Because they were all hidden in the pages of the big book, really.
Yes. And how did you research? How did you find out about these people?
I had to go to Scotland, obviously, but also Andrew Bonner, who collects them, put a little biographical piece in front of some of the letters.
Yes.
So I got some of the facts, and then we went up for several holidays to Fair Anwas by that Solway,
right,
and looked round Rutherford's church. It's in ruins.
Yes.
And yes.
Well, all along there, the Solway Firth, there's a lot of church history, isn't there, from the Covenanters onwards?
Wonderful.
Yes, it is
very
interesting.
Yes.
All right, so from Samuel Rutherford, what came next?
Well, of course, it set me off.
Yes.
What have you got there?
Well, I've got all your... How many books have you written, do you know?
About 20... Is it 20, 25?
Well, let's talk about some of the definitive ones.
Yes.
So you mentioned Lady Jane Grey. I love this biography. And, of course, 9-Day Queen of England. In fact, I have this picture in the fullness over my desk.
Have you?
Not the original.
No.
But I love this picture. Tell us about Lady Jane Grey. You've already mentioned the park which has got connections in Leicestershire.
Well, this was after Paul's ministry in Yorkshire had finished.
Yes.
And we were living in here basically. And
so this is Derbyshire.
Yes. And were able to get to Bradgate Park, where in the beautiful park with deer and everything, but there, rather starkly, are the ruins of her home, and as Lady Jane's Tower is almost intact, and you can imagine this girl studying there. She was a brilliant girl, yes, and then the call to become queen, which
at the age of 16.
Yes,
amazing.
Yes, and then the people of the country rose up against her. I mean, they didn't know her. They wanted Mary to be queen, who was a pretty vicious woman.
Was.
And Lady Jane was thrown into prison, where she was for 6 months before her execution. And it was her father who rebelled against the Queen, and Queen Mary was scared that Lady Jane was going to take the throne, and so had her done away with.
So she really had Lady Jane, her own cousin, executed, and the picture, it is Lord Farringdon, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Canterbury, pleading with her to become a Catholic at the very last. Amazing.
Yes.
And what I find very striking from this, Faith, the thing that stands out, on the night before her execution, she was writing a letter to a cousin, pleading with her to trust Christ, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. She was an amazing girl.
She was
actually.
amazing.
Actually, yes.
There were brutal days, and she died. I think she recited Psalm 51, didn't she?
Yes,
before
she did.
died.
Right on the scaffold.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, I love this book, and I think it's very powerful. It's great service you've given us by writing this. But you've done other very definitive biographies.
Yes.
Of course, I love William Grimshaw, who, though he was only just born in Lancashire, just half a mile into the Lancashire border, his great work was done in Yorkshire, wasn't it?
Yes. And, well, of the larger works, Grimshaw's my favourite.
Really?
Yes. I loved writing that.
So he was Vicar of Haworth and saw huge blessing, didn't he?
Amazing.
Died aged 56, I think.
Yes.
And what is it that, I don't know, endears himself to you?
I suppose some of his letters that he wrote, and he was such a warm character. Yes, I mean, he loved his cow. He had a cow, and he sold it because he was scared it would follow him into church. He didn't mean literally. He meant his sermon would be ruined because he was thinking of his lovely cow. so he, I mean, it was so sad because he depended on his cow for milk.
Yes,
but he got rid of it. Yes.
Well, there are lots of wonderful stories. He was slightly eccentric, wasn't he?
Yes. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well, Warren Wiersbe said mavericks make the ministry, and that was true of him.
Yes.
I love the story as well about his son, who was a sort of ne'er-do-well.
Yes.
But 2 years after,
yes.
he was riding his father's horse, and somebody said, "Aye, once a great saint rode on that horse, and now a great sinner."
Yes.
And he dismounted, do you remember, and said, "Won't my father be surprised to see me in heaven?" Because he'd been converted.
Yes.
It's a wonderful book, and you've written more about him as well, because you've taken the events around Grimshaw and you've written a novel about it as well. Why did you write a novel?
Well, I used fact.
Yes.
But I just invented a family who lived in Haworth.
Yes.
And so you could say it was 50-50. I mean,
all right, faction, I think they call it, don't they?
Do they?
Yes,
do they? Yes. So I mean, all the bits. I mean, Rutherford used to go round the church, his congregation, and deal with them big time.
Yes.
If they didn't attend the church. Yes. I mean, they're actually the story that he had a horsewhip. And whipped them in is not true. There's no early evidence of that.
No, interesting. But you love John Bunyan as well, and you've written. Well, this is the definitive one, but you've written a shorter one as well, haven't you? A Pilgrim Path.
Yes.
But tell us about John Bunyan.
Well, I think of all the people I really relate to would be Bunyan. I mean, I love his writing. It just moves me, and yes, I just wanted to.
How were you drawn to each of these characters? How did you decide who you wanted to write about next?
Lady Cathwood pushed me on to Grimshaw.
Oh right.
Yes, and I suppose one thing after another, you thought of people. I don't know who recommended Selina, but
yes. Well, let's come on to Selina then. Selina, Countess of Huntingdon, and who was incredibly influential. She was an aristocrat at the time of Wesley and Whitfield, and encouraged these preachers who were going around the country at that time and seeing revival.
Yes.
She helped them financially, but she created open doors of opportunity. Didn't she?
She was an amazing woman. Yes. That was the hardest one to write.
Oh right, because
it took me 5 years. Actually, I may have written something in between, but when I was working on her. But I spent hours in John Ryland Library in Manchester. Yes, and that's a very, very particular library. You have to have a lot of credentials even to enter the doors.
Oh right.
But just a funny story.
Yes.
I was busy reading through these manuscripts, and somebody came and sat at the opposite table, and I didn't bother to look up. And then I did look up, and it was my rascally son. I don't know how he got in. Edward, he just sitting opposite me quietly. He didn't say he'd come. And it was so particular. You had to have credentials to get in. So.
Amazing.
He was working in Manchester.
Right.
Fair enough, but how he got in there, I don't know.
Wonderful.
Yes,
wonderful.
Yes, but I was often at John Ryland.
When you say it was hard work, was that work you didn't enjoy?
Well, it was quite painstaking. Yes, I actually started writing Selina. I did her childhood and the young woman, and then I researched the rest.
Right.
I couldn't in my mind. I couldn't take in her whole life. So I actually wrote it halfway and then researched halfway, and then did like that.
But do you enjoy doing the research?
Yes, I loved it.
Do you?
Yes. I mean, basically, I'm happiest at my desk. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And of these definitive books, which is your favourite? Is it
Grimshaw?
Grimshaw, is
yes.
it really?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Interesting. Because there's been another book about Grimshaw that I've read that really sort of casts a shadow over him, but you don't accept that, do you?
No, I think I researched that whole background.
Yes.
And found it. Yes. Who it started it off and so on. Yes,
very easy for a bad rumour to take hold of. Yes.
Yes.
Now, I of all my your books, apart from the Yorkshire one, which is very special to me, we'll come on to that, I love this book, The Sound of Trumpets.
Yes.
Particularly, you've got John Nelson in here, who was the man who brought Methodism to Yorkshire. I've done quite a bit of work myself on John Nelson, so I'm very pleased about that. But Christian Watt. Yes. I just love that biography. There are a few of them here, but tell us about Christian Watt.
Well, you probably remember it better than I do now. Yes, I mean, she was such a poor girl, but yes, the Lord took her up and used her wonderfully.
Well, she was a fisherwoman, wasn't she, in Aberdeen? But she was incarcerated in we'd call it, I'm not sure what we'd call it, but a mental hospital. But it was an asylum, really, wasn't it?
Yes.
And it was horrendous. And yet what she did there, as far as sharing her faith and the love she had for the Lord and the other inmates.
She was terribly poor.
Yes.
And she had to collect shells, whelks from the seashore to feed her 9 children. I mean, it's enough to send anyone into trouble.
Well, I've read the biography of Christian Watt a few times. Every time shed a tear or two. And I have to say as well, I've told the story in a number of places. Yes. I love it. Yeah. And I've got... there's a book about her diaries, isn't there, which I'm sure you used in research.
I did, yes.
How do you follow... you get an idea, then you've got to research. How do you follow the trail? Do you go to libraries? Do you go to... Is that what you do?
Yes, and yes, wherever I pick up that she's been... I would go. Yes. I mean, it's interesting.
You have a gift though, because I saw you once researching the life of Samuel Marsden, who was from Yorkshire but took the gospel to New Zealand, and I was with you in the museum, and I saw how you sort of, I don't know, laser beamed into the right information. So there is a gift there, isn't there?
But yes, I mean, by nature, I'm much more reclusive, say, than my husband Paul, and I was happy to sit at my desk. Writing and so on.
Yes, interesting. Now you've written about persecuted Christians as well, Singing in the Fire, and there's another one as well, Stars in God's Sky.
Yes.
Is that a particular burden of yours?
I think it was. Yes, I mean, yes. Some of the people who've suffered for Christ's sake, I mean, they've just gone into oblivion.
Yes.
They needed their stories told.
Yes.
Yes, I mean. Yes, I mean, I think you encouraged me along the way.
Well, possibly. I certainly encouraged you with this one, Fine Gold from Yorkshire.
That's
of course,
entirely you. Yes.
Well, there are over 30 well-known Christians from history who were from Yorkshire, and it's just a lovely book. Wilberforce, Hudson Taylor, of course, and your parents' relationship with CIM is important there. Joel Nelson, Kit Calvert, the man who established the Hawes Creamery and Wensleydale cheese, and Bronte, Titus Salt, etc. I love this book.
Yes. Well, it's so interesting. It's to discover. I mean, I didn't know about these people till I started to research it.
Yes.
So it was increasing my knowledge. I didn't sort of say, "Oh, I'll write about them." I mean, I didn't know he even existed.
No,
Titus Salt,
wonderful
and the
man.
rest of them, yes.
And you've done about hymn writers as well.
Yes, well, that's much more in my blood. I mean, I love hymns.
Right.
And so I mean, I loved writing that one.
Interesting. Interesting. Do you have a favourite of all the books?
Well, I think Grimshaw does stand out.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
And Caught in the Web again is sort of faction, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Now this one. So I began to read. Mm-hmm. So you've covered the first part of your sort of autobiography and the last part, but the middle you've omitted. But this is the last part, and you introduce how you started to read and write. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, I don't know if it was you, but somebody, one or two people who had read Troubled Journey, said, we do want something on your life. And actually, it's a very tricky situation, because with Paul being alive, I couldn't really write about my married life. I mean, it wouldn't be fair or right, or my children or anything. So somebody said, well, you could write about the books you've read, and actually it does become autobiographical without going into the things that were difficult.
So life hasn't been easy, not just in childhood, but the years that unfolded.
Well, I mean, I don't know if anybody thinks that their life is easy.
No.
But with Paul's temperament and illnesses, it was quite lonely because you don't expect the pastor to be having a nervous breakdown.
No.
But yes, it's in the intensity of the work as well. It's not easy. But so I basically washed over all the middle years, which were difficult.
But this is very insightful, and you can pick up a lot about your life through what happened in later years.
You don't think it would damage his ministry?
Not at all.
No,
not
that
at
was
all,
what
no.
I was fearful of.
Now he's still alive, but he's not well, is he?
No.
And but you go to see him, I think, most days, don't you? Isn't it?
No, I've reduced it now
Have you? All
to
right.
about 2 or 3 times a week.
And does he know who you are?
Just.
Yes.
But he's lost all power of speech, or well, not all power, but he can't. He doesn't speak, and he doesn't know. He doesn't even know where he is. He's been there 5 years now.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
And children? How many children did you have?
I've got my 5.
5.
Yes.
But you've had sadness there.
We've
haven't
lost Jerry,
Yes.
who was the oldest son. Yes. Very, very sad. I mean, that was cardiac arrest. That died almost instantly.
And how old was he?
52. Yes,
And he was fit, wasn't he? Physically fit.
Oh, runner. Yes, he ran marathons. And
How did you cope with that as a Christian?
How did I go? Not very well, I think. I was very broken. But I never queried the goodness of God in it. But you know, you don't expect to outlive your children, do you? But he was a true Christian and a good father, and he often came here to with Jane, his wife, and spent an evening. And yes, it was just very sudden. I mean, they kept him on life support for a week, but I think he was gone. I mean, the cardiac arrest. He'd been out running. No, came home, had his evening meal, watched television, and was gone. I mean, there was just not a hint of anything wrong. So that was tough. Yes.
And heaven.
Yes.
We look forward to being with the Lord,
Very
don't we?
much, yes.
But as well, being with those we've learned about, as well as those we've loved. And who do you look forward, after the Lord Jesus, who do you look forward to seeing?
I know who I'm going to avoid.
Oh, go on.
Selina said that no one must ever write a biography of me.
Oh, really?
So I better keep...
So you think you could be in trouble in heaven,
yes,
do you?
I'll mind my distance, yes.
How interesting, because Horatius Bonner left, I think, the instruction in his will that nobody was ever to write a biography. And I've often thought, I'd love to have read a biography of Horatius Bonner. But anyway, yes.
Well, anyway.
So you're going to avoid Selina.
Yes.
Okay, but if I meet Selina, I'll tell her where you are.
Yes.
So be careful. And who else?
I would love to meet Patricia St. John.
All right.
Yes.
Now she's the... she's done her autobiography in her own words, hasn't she? Which is wonderful.
Yes.
But she wrote those children's books, Tanglewood Secrets, Treasures of the Snow, which have just been republished.
I modelled my life on her, really. She was. I was going to be a missionary and work with her in North Africa. This was my teenage dream, and she was not very impressed when someone asked me to marry them.
Oh, I see.
No, I've got the letter still. I mean, and you know, she said I can't help feeling very sad.
Oh, really?
And I mean, at the age of 14, I decided to learn Arabic in preparation.
Right.
I suppose it was a bit of child hero worship.
Right.
But my whole life was geared to my friendship with her, and she was very, very kind to me, and she gave us enormous gifts. I mean, she's helped me pay for the house and everything. I mean, she'd send us £1,000 when £1,000 was worth a lot of money, and it's only her own writing, her own royalties, and she was really very kind to me, and it was a lovely friendship, but probably Paul didn't like it at all. So that's understandable. So it was played down, but I did get to her funeral.
Yes. Well, I saw her a little while before she died because we had some family connections, and first of all, while we were talking, we were interrupted with a punk rocker about 16 years of age coming through and just said, "Hello, Pat," and walked through the house. And I said, "Oh, what was that about?" And she said, "Oh, we've turned our garage into a place where there's table tennis and pool so that the young people can come and play and we get to know them." And then a bit later on she said, "Now, Roger, I've got to go soon because I have my football team." Now, this is Patricia St. John in her 80s and she was the coach of a squad of 10-year-old boys. But it was her getting alongside so she could share the Lord Jesus with them.
A lovely life.
Yes.
And of course I knew her parents well.
Harold St. John, yes.
And his wife.
Yes.
So it was a real privilege.
Yes. Well, on that note, Faith, thank you very, very much. It's lovely to chat and lovely to hear your stories. And I think there's a deep mine of information down there that I'd love to have unearthed a bit more from, but thank you very much.
I think that was adequate.
Well, the Lord bless you. Thank you.